Caspar,
you've got to pass the mic in.
Yes.
Shall I go?
Oh, yes, you may.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I get the mic, so I get to go first. Okay, I mean, so a couple of questions that have come out of the things that those speakers were talking about. One, I was thinking about this question of happiness and the hedonism just in relation to Bruce's introduction and his responses. I know we had a debate some time ago about happiness. The question was, how happy were they at various points of their life? And actually, there was a huge majority of people who said that, you know, the period when their children were at home was actually one of the least happy periods of their life. Now, this didn't say anything about whether they loved their children, whether they would do it again, whether they wanted to do that. So actually, you know, what people want to do with their lives and happiness are actually two quite separate things. This is just one example, but I thought it was a rather nice example.
Can I just chip in and say that fits the fact that the higher IQ, the fewer children you have, because people with high IQ are better able to foresee the effect on their happiness.
But, yeah, I think the point I was trying to get at, though, was that actually people, even if they recognise that, still want to have children because their goals in life, and that's why it's only one example, you know, people's goals are not just geared around their own happiness, they go well beyond that. So, now, a couple of other things. I was thinking about this point about Brave New World. I mean, a lot of the stuff you talked about reminded me of Brave New World in different ways. Again, you know, this idea of things being geared to happiness, you sort of think about the population who are completely drugged up on soma so that everybody's happy, and this is seen as a better type of existence. Now, I know that's not what you're proposing, but it seems to be a logical conclusion of trying to approach things in that way.
It's the opposite, right? Because in Brave New World, people are forced to take soma. In the transhumanist vision, it is individually driven and people do what they want. It is a very libertarian philosophy.
Okay. And on some vehicle stuff, I've been always interested in those ideas of what one can. I'm a mathematical modeler originally, so what can one model and what can one actually do in a computer? Certain things that you mentioned specifically, I mean, imagination and skepticism are two things that I'm particularly interested in, and how one could, well, imagine perhaps a computer being able to do this, whether you actually think that that's a realistic possibility. Also, on this question of changing human nature, you mentioned the physical substrate, and that's your interpretation of what human nature, but that differs very different from mine. You know, I was talking earlier about societies and history and politics as actually being central to my understanding of what we mean when we talk about human nature, not simply the physical substrate.
Okay.
Hi. First to Bruce. Hi. I think I still am a member of the Mormon Church. I certainly grew up in the Mormon Church. Although I'm an atheist now. So I'm not, you're probably your best model. However, I thought it was a very interesting take you had on it. I don't agree with the way you're actually dividing it. I think I would divide it along anti-human and pro-human. More reflective of, for instance, the Enlightenment humanists, I suppose I'm thinking of. And what I found interesting about your model is that in the past you would have had the pro-rational humanist variety being the sort of the most pro-human, and in fact the religious aspects as being more anti-human, more trying to repress aspects of human, a celebration of elements of the fact that human beings can determine their own existence in the Enlightenment comes at that stage. And what's interesting at the models that you're talking about is that I think probably the Mormon Church is more pro-human now than the transhumanist elements, and that's what's fairly interesting about it. Despite being an atheist, I have certain admiration for the Mormon Church in some of the ways it operates and in some of the ways it celebrates it celebrates humanity in a certain sort of weird way. I just thought it was very interesting that this, and there's elements of transhumanism that I think are fantastic. I share Pauline's idea of this. The plasticity of human nature I think that's absolutely right. But with the transhumanists, if I'm correct, they also have this idea that we need to expand the boundaries of human beings and include, for instance, the higher apes. I'm not sure whether that's involved, but there is that sort of misanthropic element that runs through a lot of this stuff. And I find it interesting that in fact it's the church that is, the churches that are actually more pro-human. Just a question for Igor. I thought it was really interesting what you were saying. One of the things that struck me was you talked about the private element. And that sort of made me think of Hannah Arendt's whole discussion of public and private spheres, and how a private sphere is absolutely necessary to determine something that is human. How can you build a private machine? I don't think that you can do that. I don't think that you can, when you begin with a private sphere, it must build itself. That's what it makes us human in some ways, is that we build ourselves from the private sphere. Every single computer is public in almost its definition. Okay, well, for any kind of machine is public. It has been built by somebody else from its core outwards. And that's what seems to me as being a very important human element, as being that private sphere, and how you cannot build, that we can't just simply then be informational machines, because there is that private aspect. Simply, well, we cannot be just defined as informational machines if we have that private sphere, which, as I say, I agree with.
Can you say why not?
Because you cannot build a private sphere. You cannot build privacy. How can anybody build, that takes a team of people making something private, which must build itself. How can you do that?